Life doesn't stop while on vacation. Neither do medical issues, accidents, or worse. We are going to ask the questions others won't, so you can protect yourself and your family.
Hey everybody, my name is John Shell of Cruise Addicts. Thank you all for watching today. We really appreciate tuning in. Today we're going to cover something we've never covered before. We're actually going to talk about your cruise contract and what you sign away before you sail. We actually have acclaimed attorney Tom Scolaro of Miami. He's been an attorney for 25 years, and he's going to join us and cover many things that honestly aren't being covered in the cruise community. I've been following cruising for over 25 years, and obviously I've cruised a lot. And you kind of feel like you sign away your life a little bit with those cruise contracts. And today we're going to get into the nitty gritty. We're going to do a deep dive and really have a great resource for the future. Hopefully nothing ever happens when we cruise, but unfortunately things do happen. They're a small minority, but we're going to cover these things and we're going to do it in a real specific way. So I'm going to start off by asking this right up front here. We ask that you do not mention any brand or ship name in your comment or question. Questions that do not follow this will be removed, because we're not going to be slamming brands or ships or anything like that. We don't want to hurt anybody in the process. A lot of people, this is their livelihood, but unfortunately things do happen. Is it very rare? Yes. Are they very serious? Yes. And we're going to provide a resource, and we're going to bring Tom in here, and we're going to learn about how things are happening, but also what you can do to protect you and your family. And that's what this is all about. And we're going to do many different episodes. We're going to cover many topics, but we're going to start right from the front about your cruise contract. So we're going to go back to that here, like you said. And we're going to get Tom in here. Hi, Tom. Thanks for joining us. We really appreciate it. It's such an honor.
Good afternoon. Great to be here. Thanks for the invite, John. Appreciate it.
And, Tom, obviously we talked quite a bit here at the beginning of the purpose here, but I wanted to give an intro. Everybody on the podcast and the live stream gets an intro. So I want to introduce the audience to you. Tom Scolaro is a legal career spans over 25 years, and he is the founding partner of Scolaro Law in Miami, which specializes in personal injury and has handled many high-profile cruise and maritime cases. Tom's reputation extends beyond the courtroom. He has been recognized by esteemed publications such as Best Lawyers in America and Florida Super Lawyers, reflecting his standing in the legal community. His peers often seek his insights, and he has contributed to various legal seminars and discussions, sharing his knowledge on cruise ship litigation and personal injury law. To most, a cruise ship is a floating resort. To Tom, it's a jurisdictional puzzle, a liability minefield, and often a trap for the unprepared. For his entire career, Tom and his team have been pulling back the curtain on cruise lines. He's gone up against the biggest names in the industry, and won cases that weren't supposed to be winnable. The kind of cases where injuries are horrific, the law is obscure and anti-consumer, and the companies are betting the victim won't fight back. And wow, that really says a lot, doesn't it, Tom?
Well, yeah, that's I like to view myself as I'm just a street lawyer, and I work for the little guy. That's just been my mentality my entire life, because it's just sort of who I am. And there's something about getting to work for actual real people and being there for in their time of crisis and anxiety and uncertainty, and solving the problem and getting them, not making them whole, because you're never made whole when you lose limbs and body parts and things of that nature, but you protect their future. And I got to tell you, I know a lot of lawyers, right? And many of them have a lot of dissatisfaction with their jobs. Not me, because my currency that I collect is in thank yous and in smiles and in stories of people. And it's very gratifying to know that you play a role, or can play a role in somebody's journey to get them back on their way. And it fits me. It fits me quite well, John.
Yeah, and we didn't bring it up in your background, but your entry into the legal field kind of started with a tragic event in your own life, isn't that right?
Yeah. So it's funny, I'm from a small town in upstate New York, Garnerville. No one's ever heard of it except maybe you, because you're from Westchester County. Maybe you have. And I grew up a child of the 80s, and my whole thought process of the law was defined by the show Law and Order. So all I ever wanted to do was be a prosecutor and be Jack McCoy. I mean, I watched every episode. I can recite the lines and mannerisms because he felt that sort of passion and that righteous indignation. And so that's what I did. I wanted to be a prosecutor. I went to law school, but fate steps in. And it stepped in a very unfortunate way for me. And my path is I came down to the University of Miami, and I have an older brother. And so my older brother and I shared a motorcycle, and we would take turns every other weekend driving to the west coast of Florida to go visit our nonna, our Italian grandmother. And being Italian, that means you would fill up on pasta and everything. So as struggling law students, we would go there quite often and get our fill on the pasta and bring the sauce back. But one night it was his turn, and he got rear-ended by a drunk driver in Alligator Alley. And it was bad. It was very bad. He lived. He's alive, and he had a catastrophic brain injury. And so I was that client where I've got to get my family member immediate help, medical, legal. And I didn't know. I mean, I'm a transplant. I was from New York, so I didn't know anything about anything. So I asked some law school professors for recommendations on things to do, and I got situated with a law firm down here in Florida. They worked on my brother's case. They got him a really good result. And then, I saw and I felt, wow, the relief. My brother's going to be okay. He's now taken care of. And that was just a paradigm shift for me. I realized real quick, they didn't pay Jack McCoy very much. So I couldn't afford to take that job as much as I wanted to because of all the law school debt. But more than that, I was being called to something. And, I never was able to, in law school or anything, embrace the term personal injury lawyer. I always felt icky about it.
Yeah.
Because, you see the commercials and all that stuff, and it's very off-putting. But when you are in the arena, when you can do it and you can do it your way, with your own personality, it's, I think, the highest calling we have as attorneys is to be able to help one another. And like I said, it stuck with me real quick, and it's been my life for 25 years, and I couldn't imagine doing anything else now. If you asked me to try and pay a parking ticket or how to fight a speeding ticket, I couldn't help you out, John. Don't know how to do it. I mean, I could probably refer you to a lawyer who does that stuff, but no, this is what I do. This is what God put me on this earth to do. I'm convinced of it through the stories and the clients and the trials and tribulations that I've been through through this 25 years. It can't be by happenstance. It has to be divine on some matter. I need to believe that because, the stuff that I have to see and get involved with, man, it's just no good. There is so much death and destruction and crippling and unfairness that stuff befalls innocent people. And, you just have to be able to understand that, your job is to make that person okay. And, my wife may get upset at me because I don't react to the normal problems of life, about the AC broke or something like that. I'm like, yeah, well, that doesn't really register anymore. Let me tell you about my day and this individual I just met who, went through this experience. So I've been able to put it in perspective, and I think it's served us well moving forward.
Yeah, while you were talking, I couldn't help think. Obviously, people are coming to you just like you did with in your life, where you go to an attorney, in this case you, and they have a tragic event, and they're trying to find solutions and answers, and to try to make something whole, maybe because the person might need lifelong treatment and care. And unfortunately, and we kind of talked about at the beginning of the intro, is when you leave your house and you go on a trip, be it there's many steps there. You're obviously going to go to the airport, then you're going to go maybe to a different country, and you're going to get on a cruise ship, and there's going to be excursions, and all these things are opportunities. You can have medical issues can happen. Obviously, there can be something. There can be falls. There can be injuries. People can get hurt on excursions, and all these things that you can have an appendicitis. We were just talking about this this last week about travel insurance, and we're going to cover all these things. But the point here is things. Maybe it's a small percentage, and thank God they are. But when they do go wrong, these folks are coming to you and looking and bringing these tragic moments to you, and they're looking for solutions, right?
Yeah, and it's a lot of times they don't know what they need a solution for yet. It could just be as simple as, we need to get back to the United States. We need to be medevaced off our ship, or what do we do now? We've lost this, or this happened. So, but eventually it all crystallizes, and they understand that they need to seek redress for what happened, and look, when you leave you mentioned when you leave the house and you sort of you change things up. You're not on your normal routine. You're not going your normal way to work. You're not in your normal work office. You're not at your normal little league games or something with kids. Anytime you are outside your norm, you don't realize it, but you're in a whole other universe with people and surroundings that are unfamiliar. And when we're in those situations, we're also, because we're on vacation, because we're letting our hair down a little bit, we may not be paying attention to all the senses that we typically would. Because when you're on vacation, you want to be able to relax. You want to be able to be carefree, to have another drink, to let it be somebody else's problem. And unfortunately, that plus what we'll call negligence or bad circumstances is a recipe for disaster. If you talk to people who have been in these sort of situations, cruise ship accidents, whether it be a fall or any sort of situation, almost invariably you can ask them all and they say, well, yeah, I could have done this, I could have done this different, I could have done that different, but it's all the same. They well, they're on vacation. They're just not thinking about that. They're not thinking about knock on wood, I always do this. The reason why nothing's ever happened to me yet is I walk around like I got eyes in the back of my head. Okay. It's just, I can't shut it off because I've seen it all. And so, and people intuitively have that. But when you go on vacation, I'm telling you, they turn that switch down. They turn the volume off on that sort of speaker that says, no, don't go left. Don't do that. No, it turns off a little bit. And so that's why they generally find themselves in a world of hurt sometimes.
Yeah, and I think you were saying that obviously people, they go on vacation because they want to let their guard down. They want to relax, let their hair down, like you said, just to calm down, because we're so wired so tight and everything's so wound up. And I know I've even told people take a 7-day cruise, because it takes you about 3 days to kind of wind down a little bit and realize, okay, I'm actually on vacation. And in America, sometimes it's even, most people, I think the average people only get maybe a week a year. So someone that gets more time than that, they've waited a whole year for this, maybe more. This may be a trip of a lifetime, and then they've got to kind of, like I said, relax, and it takes days for that to happen. And then, unfortunately, like I said, sometimes things go wrong, and they come to you. And I don't think people realize that some of these things happen.
It's funny. In my line of work, it's funny. You never know you need a lawyer or you should know a lawyer until something bad happens to you, right? And you always think, oh, it's not going to happen to me. It's not going to happen to me. It's going to be somebody else. The human brain is not wired to think, any differently, because it's millions of years of evolution of, self-protection, where you just think it's not going to happen to me. And I get it, that's the mentality that a lot of people have. But again, when it does happen to you, then what, right? Then what do you do? And so that's where somebody like me comes in, or there's other people like me. It doesn't have to be me. And there's a lot of good ones out there, some not so good ones, but a lot of the good ones that I know, they're there to help. They're there to really help you, make this okay and get you back on your feet, and get you compensated for this. But there's a ton of obstacles in the way. This is not for a newbie. And I don't think it should be anything that anybody tries to do unless you specialize in it. Maritime admiralty law, cruise ship law, all of that stuff is very different. Now, interesting, John, you're, obviously the people who take cruises, right? They're not from Florida. Most of them, they're from Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York, wherever, Chicago. They're from everywhere else. And when somebody, has an unfortunate occurrence on a cruise ship, they don't know a lot of what's next. What they most likely do, and that we see, is they'll contact a family friend, a lawyer that they know in their community, and they'll tell them about what happened and say, hey, can you help me? It's usually how the conversation goes. And, one of two things will happen there. Either the local lawyer will try and, well, all right, well, I'll bring a claim here in, Harrison, Pennsylvania against this cruise line because they're a big international cruise line. You live here, we can sue them here, we could do whatever we want here. We'll just sue them in federal court. If you do that, you got yourself a problem. And we can get into this a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because the ticket that you purchase, that everybody purchased, it lays out what has to happen. So if your lawyer in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania tries to do the case on his own, you've got a problem, and it's going to get worse. So what the second thing is that lawyer may do, if he's smart, he'll research. Well, lawyers are very good at what? Researching, right? So he should research, what to do in this type of situation. Although now you can probably just ask Chat GPT and Chat will tell you what to do in 2 minutes, right? But the way that this works is any attorney will, if they do 2 minutes worth of research, will understand right quick that they'll need to contact a Florida-based lawyer, because should you want to sue, for the vast majority of the cruise lines, again, I don't want to name names, but for the vast majority of them, the lawsuit has to be filed here in the Southern District of Florida. There's one cruise line that requires their lawsuits to be filed in the Western District of the state of Washington. Washington, well, that's where they're located. And there's reasons why the cruise lines do it. They like to have some degree of control, some degree of certainty. They don't want different rulings on similar issues. And so the body of law, the common law that has been developed in maritime law here in the Southern District of Florida is quite comprehensive. So everybody knows what the law is, whatever fact pattern you may have, whatever notice provisions are required, what the elements of the claim are, because the case law has been developed down here. It's not a hodgepodge from other jurisdictions. So it makes sense from a business standpoint why they want to do it. I kind of actually agree with it. Can you imagine being a corporation like one of these cruise lines and having to defend cases in, Scottsdale, Arizona, and Bangor, Maine, or, St. Paul, Minnesota? That's a logistical nightmare. They'd have to get law firms in all those different places. They'd have to understand what the law is in those different places. So it makes sense for them to do it here. So anytime you take a cruise, right, and let's assume something untoward happens, first things I would tell you is take a look at your passenger ticket contract, because that is going to tell you where your claim needs to be filed. Now you can consult and should consult with a local lawyer who that lawyer will then do the vetting for you. They'll find somebody skilled in maritime law. Like I said, doesn't have to be me, but there's plenty of other people who specialize in this area, and we've got years and years of experience doing it. So we would then do the intake with that lawyer and the client, and then the case would be prosecuted here in the Southern District of Florida. Now, I've gotten phone calls where, from lawyers in other parts of the country say, hey, can you help me? I have this case against so-and-so cruise line, and, it happened, a little over a year ago, but that's okay because we already filed suit here in, whatever county it is. I say, sir, unfortunately, I cannot help you. You may have filed the lawsuit within 1 year, and that's another thing we'll get into, but you filed it into the wrong jurisdiction. So the case gets dismissed, and it gets dismissed with prejudice. You can't refile a case and have the statute of limitations be met if it's now barred because you filed in the wrong venue. I tell you, I've gotten that phone call a lot of times over my career. And, the second part of the conversation I want to say, and I've never had the stones to say it, is you really should call your malpractice carrier. That would be the second thing I want to say, but I don't. I just say, unfortunately, I cannot help you. I don't want to kick a horse while it's down.
Yeah, it's obviously a very specialized practice. Like you said, these venues are real important, where you either have to be in a federal court in Miami, right, or a federal court in Washington State, or wherever the venue is based on the ticket, the passenger contract, right?
Yeah.
So it's very, very serious. And like you said, and we talked about this before, doing this live stream, that if you don't get it right from the beginning, if you don't go to the right attorney that knows to do this properly, then you could be thinking you have a case, and all of a sudden it expires because you filed in the wrong, like you said, in the wrong venue, because the attorney just wasn't informed. He wasn't properly informed, because this isn't what he does. He might be a great attorney, but he's not the best cruise and maritime attorney like yourself.
And that's the thing. And listen, I've had to turn down some good cases that would have otherwise been good cases, but for the fact that they filed in the wrong forum, and they failed to call me before this is a problem that's fixable if you still file in Florida within the 1 year. So that brings me to the second topic, which is the statute of limitations. And I want to go over this for a minute with your listeners. So every case that somebody may has, whether it be a car accident, a fall, a malpractice, whatever, you don't have through now to eternity to file your case. Every state has what's called a statute of limitations. Okay, that means if you get into a car accident here or in some other place, you have to file your case within that time period. Now, most states, it's 4 years. Florida used to be 4 years up until very recently. Then we had a whole shift in our law where our legislature moved it down to 2 years, but that's state substantive law. So, okay, you would think, all right, so I have 2 years to file my claim, right, Mr. Scolaro? No, you don't, because embedded within your ticket contract is a shorter statute of limitations. There's actually two things. So one is you must put them on written notice of your case within 6 months to give them the particulars of what happened, your name, your address, what happened, where. You got to do that. Okay. If you don't do that, you have a problem as well. But the second thing is you must get your lawsuit filed in the correct form within 1 year. Okay. 1 year comes up pretty quick. You may not think of it that way, but it does. You can, I can think of one case right now where a gentleman was injured on a cruise line, and he gave me a call. I'm not sure if I want to do anything. I don't know, sir. Your choice. You let me know if you want to. But I had to warn him. There's a statute of limitations for these things. You must do so before 1 year. And I would like the opportunity to investigate a claim, to vet it, to do my due diligence. And so that takes, I don't know, a couple weeks to do. Guy called me back on the eve of the statute of limitations running. I said, sir, I can't help you. I can't file a lawsuit when I don't have a good faith basis to know if there's a legitimate claim here, because I haven't had time to vet it myself. When you file a claim in a lawsuit, you're supposed to do some vetting. You're supposed to do some homework on it. You can't just take your client's word for everything. Now, generally, sometimes you may not have investigative tools, you may not have formal discovery, but there's things that you can do and research. So in his particular case, I didn't feel comfortable taking a case on the eve before the statute of limitations runs. I said, so there may be lawyers out there who will do it. I'm just not willing to put my license up for that. And I don't ever know what happened to him. Maybe it worked out, maybe it didn't, but you got to pay attention to this statute of limitations. It's a complete bar to recovery. I mean, you can have the most meritorious case on the planet. They can admit to you in writing, the cruise line, I screwed up, I injured Mr. Smith, and we want to pay him a cajillion dollars. They can put that in writing. Right? Doesn't mean anything if you don't file your lawsuit within that statute of limitations. It's all gone. And I've had that conversation with some unfortunate lawyers too, that they don't know to check the passenger ticket contract. But and this is a lesson for maybe everything. There's so much that we are doing in our day-to-day lives now that are controlled by these very onerous user agreements, these participation agreements, these registration things or tickets. It's in everything. You're signing away your life, not signing away your life, but you're severely limiting your options, and you don't even know it. So whether it's a cruising issue or a consumer issue or whatever, you always got to check the documents, because these documents, they are drafted by lawyers, and they're drafted by lawyers for a reason, to protect the corporation and to limit the corporation's exposure and to limit its liability. They are not going to have consumer-friendly terms in them. It's incongruous. It doesn't exist. And they set up these barriers and these obstacles. Again, not just cruise lines, but everything. So pay attention to what you're engaging in, and always go back to the written document. Okay, don't say, oh, I'm sure it'll be okay, or I'm sure this. No, we can't be so naive in this world anymore. This is not 1970, right? I mean, where people were just good and neighborly anymore. It's corporations. I get it. They have shareholders that they have to be responsible for and towards, and fine, but be aware of it. That's all I'm saying, is be aware of it.
Yeah, I just want to interject here a little bit. Is like you just said, this is everything. This is on your airplane ticket. This is on a train ticket, probably any type of major travel or plan. It's going to be basically protecting a company and limiting. It's going to define what their role is and your role. And if something happens, it's going to define it, how it can be handled. But also, it might limit what they're exposed to, their exposure. Is that the proper legal term?
That is the proper legal term. And so, I mean, this isn't legal advice that I'd be giving out right now. This is more life advice. And I'm sure one of your sponsors will be happy to hear this, I will tell everybody, get the travel insurance, okay? Just pay for the extra travel insurance. It's when, God forbid, you need it. Can you imagine trying to, because I've seen this, can you imagine trying to work out the logistics of getting home from Panama? When the ship is left without you, and there's nothing but these remote hospitals that you need to be, that you're getting treated at, and you're on your phone with your provider in Hartford, Connecticut. You want to get back to Hartford, Connecticut, but how do you do it, right? You got to charter a plane. But if you have the travel insurance, oh my Lord, life gets made a lot easier. It's an insignificant amount of money for the amount of protection you get from it. So please get the travel insurance, folks.
And it's not just cruise cancellation insurance, but the insurance that actually will fly you home.
Yes.
God forbid someone gets injured, they can get someone get flown directly to the hospital, like a specialty hospital. Whatever, you can basically pick where you need to go if it's in your hometown or another state. Because if something major happens, you might need to go to a regional hospital or maybe a teaching hospital in Gainesville or North Carolina or type of New York City or something like that, right?
Can I tell you, just by having that travel insurance, I have seen it save lives, and I have seen it where if you don't have those options, people succumb to, third world medical care, or they succumb to indifference. So it just makes sense to have it. And this is one of these, throughout the course of some of our discussions that we'll have here, John, along the way, you're going to hear a lot of my little nuggets of life.
Okay.
One is, no one's looking out for you but you. Okay?
Right.
No one cares. They care to the extent they get paid to get care, to care. So no one's protecting yourself or your family. It's your job to do it. And so, again, just if you're spending for the increased package of whatever cruise or excursion, spend a few more bucks and get the insurance. It just makes sense.
Yeah, we talked about that in a live stream we did like a week or so ago with a travel agent, and he went into great detail about things go wrong, just like we're talking about on the legal side here. But it's just a small percentage. But you talk to those people almost every day, and just like he talks to those people when things go wrong, his phone rings at midnight when somebody has a fall and breaks a bone and they have to get evacuated. And the first question is, do they have insurance? Now, he, of course, sells a policy through Allianz, I believe it is. Mm-hmm. And there's different levels, though. So, of course, he recommends a medical evacuation, repatriation if someone were to pass away. That, unfortunately, it happens. People like to take travel, and we're all going to pass away one day, unfortunately. You never know if it, So all these little things that add up. Cancellation, like I said, he sells high-end travel. A trip might cost, I think one trip cost almost $100,000 because the whole family was on it. Someone hurt themselves a couple days into it. The whole family and the hurt person were able to be canceled and brought home. And of course, they didn't lose any money. It's an it saves the investment. So, and like you said, and I just, while you're talking, I couldn't help think because I thought of it, like the last time we talked about this with the cruise insurance, is I love to travel. I've been to amazing places all through the Caribbean and overseas. And unfortunately, they're beautiful places, but the care is not up to standards what we're used to in our own hometowns. We're very, very blessed in the United States. In most towns, it's remarkable. And if it's not up to par, even the local entities, the sheriffs and the EMS will fly you to the best trauma center because they know you need better. And it's usually like protocol, like head injuries. You immediately get evac'd through a helicopter to the best trauma center in the region because they know that you need better than what the local hospital can, because it's a liability for them too, right?
I mean, just ask yourself this question, right? If you're going on a cruise, the way I tell people is just ask yourself a simple question. You're going on a cruise and the itinerary cruise, I don't know, let's assume it includes like Belize or someplace or Guadalajara or someplace, wherever. Do you want your broken bone being set by a physician in Belize City, or do you want it, in wherever, Johns Hopkins in New Jersey or someplace? I mean, answer that question for yourself, and you're gonna and all right, yeah, I can spend a few extra bucks here, because it makes a difference. It makes a substantial difference in your recovery. And look, everybody knows let's call it the skill level of trauma surgeons here, of emergency room physicians, of orthopedists, and they know the rigorous curriculum that they have to go through. You don't know any of that in a third world country. You just don't, and you're playing with fire. Listen, everybody needs a doctor, and these countries, maybe they don't have the resources we do. I understand that, but if you can control it, you should certainly, up the spend on it. And here's another, I don't want to call it, well, let's just call it an observation. Most of the cruise line medical care that you would get, and I'm talking about on board, on the ship, in the infirmary, most of it you're getting from physicians who are not trained in the U.S. and who are don't practice in the U.S. You're getting a doctor from Colombia. You're getting a nurse from Panama. You're getting a doctor from somewhere else. And so if you have the option of saying, look, thank you for stabilizing me, whatever, we want off this ship, we need to get off, we need to be medevac, next port of call, whatever, you have that option now. But if you don't, you're stuck with the care that you get on the cruise line, and I've done a lot of this type of work too, unfortunately, what I would call cruise line medical malpractice. Look, these cruise ships are floating cities, and they're populated by thousands of people. And so just do the math. Somebody's going to have a medical emergency almost all the time, almost on every ship, on every trip. It's just math. And so, you find yourself in a situation where you're stuck with having medical care that you may not want. You might want to, like, if you have everything being equal, you want your doctor, you want your orthopedist, you want the guy at the hospital with all the accolades. And so, again, protect yourself, pay attention, and get yourself the extra insurance. For again, what I've seen in all these years.
Yeah, and just to recap, that's actually where if you were something to happen on board, you can get off at the first port and get evac'd and flown back home, and to get to better care, to hopefully the best care that you can find. Because just like you said, if you're going to, anytime we get anything done, we want to have the option to have it done by the best, right?
Yeah. Now, the one thing that I want to touch on this part too, because I did put it in my notes to you, is that while passengers have that option, crew do not. Okay, so crew members do not have the option of getting off the ship and going to see whatever doctor they want. They are, let's call it, beholden to stay within the system of what we call maintenance and cure. So they'll be treated by the physician on board the ship, but afterwards they will go to the cruise ship's selected physicians and their network of people. So they don't have that option, and you don't want to be stuck in that type of system. So I kind of feel bad for a lot of the crew members, and we've helped out crew members many times as well, that have unfortunately had bad experience with shipboard medical. And I'm not here to trash anybody. Sometimes you get really good care, but sometimes mistakes are made. And, mistakes are made because we're all human at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
And, but they don't have the option. Now, you or me or anybody who takes a cruise, we have an option if we, have selected the insurance issue. So just wanted to throw that out there, that unfortunately crew members don't have that option.
So we talked about this a little earlier. We'll get back to the ticket contract. We're going to go down through some of these spots. We've covered a lot, but you said the legal traps in the passenger ticket contract. So obviously that's the shortened statute of limitations. They have to be filed properly within a year, right?
Yeah, and the venue issue where you have to file your case. But there's one more that I find to be intellectually dishonest, disconcerting, and a few other adjectives that are probably not appropriate for this. And that's this. So now I don't know where your audience is generally located, John. Maybe it's all U.S. based. Maybe some people are looking from the UK or Europe. But there's an insidious clause in these contracts that when I explain it to you, you're not going to believe me. You're going to think, no, Tom, they wouldn't do that. And they would. So, and it goes like this. If anybody is injured on a cruise line, right? It doesn't matter the case, whether you're sexually assaulted, accident on an excursion, trip and fall, malpractice, whatever, wherever your mind goes, fire, it doesn't matter. There's no limitation on the amount of money or compensation we can try and pursue here in the US, okay? Because we operate off of the body of maritime law that has been developed for all these years. The United States is not a signatory to the Athens Convention, okay? Now, a lot of countries are. A lot of European countries are. And by being a signatory to the Athens Convention, they have placed a forum selection clause in their contracts where, remember I said you have to file your suit in Southern District of Florida, right? Okay. But if you're from the UK or you're from, one of these other countries that are a signatory to the Athens Convention, they will have a clause in there that says you have to file your case in the courts of England and Wales. And you think, oh, great, they did that for my convenience, so I don't have to hire a lawyer in Florida. I don't have to do that. I can, my solicitor or barrister here can bring the case and be just as fine. Oh God, no, that's not why they do it. They do it to cap their exposure and their liability exposure. So if you book your ticket and you're the UK, let's use the UK as an example. The way the IP addresses work, they will know where you are logging on from. They will know that you're in the UK, and so they're going to sell you a UK contract. And it has the same 1-year statute of limitations, but its form selection is the courts of England and Wales. And the reason that's important is because as soon as you file your case in England and Wales, it by the very nature of that country being signatory to the Athens Convention, the Athens Convention contains a cap, a ceiling on damages. Most you can ever get. It's something called special drawing rights. And that's it. Equating that to US dollars works out to about $522,000 US. And you say, well, that may sound like a lot of money. And it could be a lot of money for a broken arm or something like that. But for the death of a child, or the loss of limbs, or death of a spouse, or what have you, it's offensive on so many levels. And so they're allowed to do this. I could not believe when I first encountered this issue a number of years ago. Some people from England and Wales called me. I did not have their contract at that point in time. I was assuming it was just like everybody else. This is a number of years ago. So I filed it here in Florida, and the very next thing the cruise line did was they sued my clients in the courts of England and Wales, saying that they have been improperly sued here and that any case against them has to be brought in the court of England and Wales. And this just so happened it involved a meningitis infection on a 9-month-old baby who we alleged received malpractice was committed because they did not see the signs and symptoms of the bacterial infection quick enough. I mean, the family took this little girl to the infirmary like 5 different times. Like she was throwing up, she was pale, her color was going, she was getting cold, it was just not good, fever. They kept sending her back, saying she must have a stomach flu. Finally, the client's like, we're not leaving. Something is wrong with our daughter, and we need somebody to look at this more seriously. Lo and behold, I think the mother-in-law was a nurse or something like that. She says, we think maybe she's got an infection. And finally, remember what I told you about substandard medical care with some of these doctors? Yeah. It doesn't register. So ultimately, she ended up having this terrible infection. She lost I want to get this right. I think all the fingers on her hand, half of her right foot, and part of her left foot. 9 month old. Okay, because they didn't treat her complaints seriously enough and get her off that ship. And this is what happens when you have an infection like that. And so cruise line knew there was massive exposure in that case, massive. So once I found out that that this was actually part of their ticket contract, I said, uh-oh, we have a problem.
Yeah.
So I got together with a colleague of mine in the UK, and we developed a game plan to try and get around this. Now, while we made it work in that case, I'm telling you, it's a one-off because of the circumstances of how our ticket was booked, and the injured client being a minor, not a signatory to it. It was a one-off because this is enforceable. It is so unfair. Imagine, just do the math. Like a baby from Michigan has the same issue.
Yeah.
No cap. Baby from UK. Oh no, your limbs are only worth $522,000. How is that remotely fair? It's fundamentally unfair, but they are allowed to get away with it. There is that particular clause was previously ruled on by both the Southern District here in Florida and the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals in a case called the Estate of Myra, MYRHA, I believe. I still remember the case from, I disagree with the holding when I could remember the case from all these years ago. I still don't understand the logic of that holding, but what am I going to do? You can't complain. That's the law. So we have to work within it and around it when we can. So that's what I tell you. It's like these contracts are not written to be consumer friendly. They may be the fun ships and all. I mean, look at the commercials. It's nothing but a good old time, right? Until something goes wrong. Then it's, no. It's not us. Look at this clause. This stuff. Because I understand it because they're a corporation. They have shareholders, and that's their fiduciary obligation. 100% understand it. I don't like it, especially where people are grievously injured, especially children. That's another thing of mine. I can't stand when bad things happen to kids.
Yeah.
So again, it's all while the importance that you really need to get with somebody, a lawyer who specializes in this stuff, so they can work around all these issues and navigate this, because it is a bit of a minefield, John. And if you don't do it that case that I was describing to you, I don't want to sound conceited, but there's just no way it should have worked out the way it did, for these people.
Yeah.
I took a year of my career. I almost worked on nothing else, just because I wouldn't do that if it wasn't a baby, but man, that stuff tugs at me differently.
Well, yeah. And, I think it shows why we're doing this. That when you were telling me stories before we ever talked about even doing a live stream, I said, I have a background in public safety and service. And I think the best thing we could do to my community, of course, Cruise Act started in '99, is if things do go wrong, even if it's a small percentage, like I said, a needle in a haystack incident, which a lot of these are, but when things do go wrong, we want to be able to steer our community and have this resource for the future where people can know to reach out to a competent attorney, and when they need answers and help, they can seek counsel.
Listen, I always tell people, I hope our paths never cross. I hope you never have to meet me, because it's usually when people end up meeting me, it's usually something bad has happened. I don't, what's that figure? Oh, the Grim Reaper. I feel like I'm the Grim Reaper sometimes. You just don't want to be that person. You don't want to see that person in your in your inbox or on your phone. But look, we also can't keep our head buried in the sand too, right? Because if
Yeah.
we don't protect ourselves and take care of ourselves or protect our rights, that goes back to what I was saying. No one else is. So you have to do it for you, for yourself.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to get to some of the comments we've got.
Oh,
Uh,
great.
we've got William Welsh was checking in from Facebook. He goes, "Tell us, Tom," because he's like, you're bringing it the truth here, and I couldn't agree.
I try to.
And that's what it's all about. Like we said in the intro, a lot of this stuff has never been shared. You don't hear about a lot of these things. Um, Unfortunately, this stuff's done in the shadows. Be it an excursion or airline things. People don't realize that there's limitations if you die in an airline crash. There's all these things, and it's a small percentage. Thank God, a lot of these things are very, very safe. But when things go wrong, now we have an opportunity to introduce you to Tom and his work, and he's sharing these things. I put Tom's information down below. Please reach out to him. You can email him at tom@usinjurylaw.law. And you can also contact them at cruiseinjury.law is his website. It's right down below there. It's scrolling. You can call him at 305-424-2300. Of course, that's a Miami number. But like I said, William, we appreciate you checking in. If you have a question, we've still got a little bit of time left. Any question whatsoever as far as to cruise law or anything, personal injury, please ask below. We'd love to have the interaction. That's the focus of all this. We try to cover a topic, but we also like the interactivity. We've also got Kevin checking in from YouTube. Good afternoon from Lakeland, he's saying. So good back at you, Kevin. We appreciate you checking in with us. We really appreciate it. And I know we'll be checking the comments after this live stream. This is going to live on the internet for a long, long time, and hopefully be a great resource for everyone. So we can keep on going down here. Like I said, we've talked about the statute of limitations. We've talked about forum selection, but we haven't talked about this. You would want to cover the arbitration clauses and litigation rights. That's a lot of legal words. So what does that mean?
So very simply, this is what I would sort of describe as two classes of people. So crew members, okay? Crew members do not have the same rights that you or I do or anybody else who wants to book a cruise and go on vacation. They just don't. They have collective bargaining agreements, and as part of those collective bargaining agreements, they have agreed that if they are ever injured or need to bring a claim, that they give up their right to a jury trial. They give up their right to, do lots of different types of discovery. They get placed in arbitration, and the arbitration is usually not U.S. based. It's usually, it could be in the flag vessel's state, so Bermuda, Bahamas, things of that nature. So I actually just had a case that I just finished for a young crew member. I won't name the line, but he was from the UK. He got horribly injured. I mean, the picture would turn your stomach. And what is otherwise I don't want to call it great because something happened bad. It's a significant case, but his recovery was somewhat limited by the venue. Then the venue is we were in the Bahamas. We had to agree to arbitration in the Bahamas. Now, I resolved the case before the final hearing, and because I was cognizant of the fact that you got to strike while the iron's hot, and sometimes if you push it a little too far, these arbitrators get cases assigned to them by these massive corporations. So everything being equal, they're gonna tip the scales on the side of the corporations who they get volume business from, as opposed to somebody like me. So they don't have what you and I have. We have litigation rights. We have the right to a jury trial. We have the right to have a federal judge decide evidentiary issues based on a body of case law. It's not some person that is beholden for the work. And so that makes a substantial difference in case valuation in terms of the size of the case. And it's kind of bad because these guys have no bargaining. They have no power, and they're stuck. It's like it's again just goes back to everything we talked previously. Imagine you're booking an Airbnb, John, right? You think you can file a lawsuit over that? No, you can't. You can file an arbitration claim in Ireland if you want, or some other place, but you're not going to get, you're not going to have a litigation case. You're not. The courts here, whether it be, any one of these platforms, it's all trending towards private arbitration, which is much more expensive a process because you got to pay the arbitrator.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and sometimes it's a one-person panel, sometimes it's a 3-person panel, and you got to pay for that. You don't have to pay for a judge. Now, if you're paying your judge, you got other issues, but you don't have that. And it's what I consider arbitration to be kind of like a rigged system.
Sounds like it.
It is. Look, I have no trouble saying it. I think it is a rigged system. And I do my damnedest to get away from it, but there are occasions when you can't, and then you just got to find a different way to beat somebody up.
Yeah, that's but that costs, that's time, and of course, if your case doesn't reach that seriousness, then you might not be able to have someone that's going to go along on the ride with you too, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, everything being equal, let's assume a case comes to you with a value, and you've done an internal valuation. You think it's worth, I don't know, maybe $100,000. Yeah, I can see litigating that case, but would I want to arbitrate that case? It's not worth the effort because it's more time, more resources, and for less recovery. So, and less chances of a recovery because, again, the odds are stacked against you in arbitration. So I feel bad for these crew members. I help out as many as I can when I can, but it's just they don't have the same. They're not on the same footing, unfortunately, as guests.
And one more thing we wanted to talk about, I guess there's 2 more things, but we'll try to get to all of them. General maritime law versus Florida tort law, especially damages and defenses you have there.
Yeah, the one thing I want to point about that is the one highlight is this, and it's going to be one of the ones where like, no, Tom, you're not telling me the truth. That can't be right. It is. So, land-based accident, car crash, malpractice, doesn't matter. Pick your poison. It results in death. Okay, death of let's assume it's a spouse. Okay, you would file here in Florida or any other state, likely, a wrongful death claim. Okay, and you would get, and again, Florida, you would get the pain and suffering for losing your lifetime companion, and things of that nature. Happens on a cruise ship. You get the equivalent of almost zero. In the industry, it's kind of called the free kill. It's essentially cheaper for them to kill you than it is to hurt and maim you, and that's because of it's called the Death on the High Seas Act, which is a antiquated early, I think it's 1900s law that does not recognize any claim for pain and suffering, or what we call non-pecuniary losses for the death of an individual. You only get the amount of lost services and amount. Like, so if that individual was contributing, I don't know, $20,000 a year to the home, or supporting a person or something like that, you can get that, but you do not get the vast bulk of the otherwise collectible damage had it occurred on land. It is called the Death on the High Seas Act, or what we call DOSHA for short. It's one of the most fundamentally unfair laws in the universe, and it's not going anywhere. There's been several attempts to get some political clout behind it to overturn it. No, it's not going anywhere. So again, that's just the reality of where we are, and you have to try and figure. There's not very many ways around that. It's very, very rare when you can get around something like that. And I've been able to do it a couple of times, by pleading an alternative cause of action. And that's not a wrongful death claim. I am claiming what we would call a negligent infliction of emotional distress, which technically is not a wrongful death claim. It's technically a separate tort. But the courts are very, very restrictive on it. They understand that it can be used as an end run around the wrongful death statute. So you have to have the right set of facts. It has to be pled exceptionally well, and it has to ultimately survive judicial scrutiny on both a motion to dismiss and a summary judgment motion, which we feel our case does. But, just another nuance of this type of law that not for the faint of heart, John.
Yeah, this is serious. I mean, it's amazing how I've heard about airlines having limitations where if you die in an airline crash, you only get a certain fixed amount. And it sounds very similar that there's limitations in the passenger contract for that type of for a flight. One little side question here. It says you had written why this matters even in cases of serious injury. So did we cover that, or is there something more there?
I'm sorry, what? I didn't hear that last question.
You also had written down that why this matters even in cases of serious injury is, did we cover that already, or is there more there?
Well, the overarching theme is why all this matters is because get yourself, even if you may not believe you have a case, or maybe if you believe it's your fault, or maybe if you believe it happened on an excursion and it's not the cruise line's fault, it's somebody else's fault, or you're detracted by dosha. All this, the point is, talk to a lawyer and let the lawyer analyze the facts and analyze the law to see if there's a navigable path forward. Use a cruise term, okay? And you want to get with somebody who's creative thinking, who has a hard time with the problem. No, I don't quite understand that word. So it's important that you just get somebody's opinion on it, up or down.
And we've obviously covered quite a bit here. I know it's new for a lot of people. I know this is new for me, and we appreciate you bringing this information to us because I really don't think people know about this.
It's human nature. We don't want to think about what could happen. I get it. I was one of those people, long time ago too, but I've since wised up. And
I know I've enjoyed learning this from you, and I'm sure everybody else has too. And people will be listening to this and watching this months and weeks down the road. If they have a problem, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Yeah, best is just call the office line at 305-424-2300. Or, probably the fastest is to drop me an email, tom@usinjury.law. I'm probably terrible at answering the phone, but, I have my phone on me all the time, and it's got my emails on it. So I will see the email, and I will generally respond as quickly as I can. Like I have it on vibrate, so it hasn't been going off as much, but I'm sure there's a stack that I have to get to as soon as this is done, and I will do it, and I will call those folks back. But yeah, email is pretty quick. And I try to make it easy to remember, tom@usinjury.law.
Yeah. Now, we've covered a lot. Is there anything that we haven't covered yet that you want to share with us before we go?
I think we're good. There is a lot that we covered, and there'll be more for us to talk about in the future. But I think we've covered the main topics that I want people to leave this sort of discussion with.
Yeah, it's been really informative. I know I've learned a lot, and I hope other people have too. So I hope you have a great day. Thanks for taking the time to join us and sharing your insights and experience. And I know we're going to cover more in the future.
Great. Thank you for the invitation, John. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.